terms of banking, since we have the advantage of having your expertise here, we have seen bank consolidations. We're seeing banks that have been acquired. You now own Merrill Lynch. Right. Congratulations. And I hope my account is relatively safe.
It's safe.
But in terms of the banks here in South Carolina, all these people who are doing their banking here, what kind of shape are they in?
I think community banks, if you're banking with a South Carolina bank that's resident here and operate only in South Carolina, you're fine. A lot of them didn't get into the risky mortgage-backed securities and credit default swaps and things of that nature. Larger banks, I think for the most part, they're safe. I mean, Bank of America is doing well. I think a great example how we really don't want the federal government running in too soon is with Wachovia. Wachovia was not at the brink of failure. They did have some problems when they purchased Golden West and with the mortgages that they had on the books. So I think if the government wanted to do something with the $300 billion we gave Fannie and Freddie, they could have bought those assets back. So it's a great example of how if the federal government doesn't run in too soon, where there were better offers on the table, and really was selling Wachovia for at a fire sale cost. So I'm happy to see that changed. But the banks here, to get to the original question, I think they're doing fine. But there will be continued consolidation. But there will always be a need for community banks and credit unions in our state.
Well, Glenn, I hope you can assure us that Bank of America is in good shape, because I'm a stockholder.
I am too. I am too.
Okay, now John and I are both feeling a little bit better this evening. There was a lot of discussion last night about a gentleman named Joe Wurzelbacher, Joe the Plumber. And while Joe the Plumber was, I believe, from Ohio, there's a Joe the Plumber around the corner here somewhere in South Carolina. How do you think Joe reacted to what he heard last night?
Well, Dean Bierbauer, I had a little bit of an experience similar to yours in that I was traveling, and I didn't hear the initial bit about Joe the Plumber because I was driving from Charlotte, the Charlotte airport down here, and I got about half of the broadcast over the radio. But
I can give you that little bit.
Right.
I got the transcript too.
I have seen excerpts and heard commentary on it. South Carolina has lots of Joe the Plumbers. Joe the Plumbers have not been doing very well in the last 8 years. Joe the Plumber needs a helping hand. He needs a tax break. And Joe the Plumber will get a tax break unless he makes $250,000 a year. If he gets a tax break, if he makes $250,000 a year, he's going to get his taxes increased, which I think is fair, which I think is appropriate, given the financial needs to operate the government, and given the needs to repay and cover these expenses of $1 trillion or more dollars that have gone into the various efforts to save AIG and the banks in general, and to treat this problem. $1 trillion. So Joe the Plumber, if he makes under $250, is going to get a tax break. If he makes over $250, his taxes are going to be increased. And I would just assert to you, there are a hell of a lot more people in South Carolina who make under $250,000 a year than there are who make over $250,000 a year. So that's a good break for South Carolina.
And of course, that tax increment would be the same if it were Joe the professor, or Joe the banker, or any other Joe. I mean,
well, I guess there's some dudes who make
$250,000
a year here, but I don't know any professors who do.
Check the business.
Joe the Plumber. And you know, I think Joe the Plumber, how he became famous is the conversation, as we all know, with Senator Obama, and really talking about redistribution of wealth. That's basically what it is. If you make $250,000, I'm going to tax you, which is only going to generate, at best guess, 125 to 130 billion in revenue, and you have $1 trillion plus on the table of new spending. So I would disagree with that approach with the 250,000, because when you look down at the 95, within that about 45% really don't have a tax liability. So they'll get a welfare check from the government, no liability, and as a result, I don't think you can do that. I really don't. Bill Clinton actually said that he wasn't going to raise taxes. He did. You know, you go back in history. Even George Bush, the first, first President Bush, said that he wasn't, and he did. So I think you can't raise taxes in this environment and not expect our economy to go into a down spiral. I really don't.
Could I respond to this?
Please.
Redistribution of wealth. You know, that gets into all of this language that we don't like to hear. The Bush administration has redistributed the wealth from the middle class to the rich. And this bailout of $1 trillion is a redistribution of wealth to the banks and the other financial institutions. Now, if you're going to do that, it seems to me that the people who make $250,000 or less probably deserve a tax break. You know, this capital gains tax that people seem so fearful of and say it's a job killer. It's a job killer. President Bush has given more capital gains taxes than any president in history, and we have lost jobs. We've lost almost 750,000 jobs in the last year. During the 8 years of the Clinton administration, we created 22 million new jobs. In the 7 years and 9 months of the Bush administration, it's about 7 million. So tell me about capital gains and creating jobs. The record is very clear. Compare Clinton and Bush. Tax gains treatment under Bush and Clinton, and you'll get the story.
Well, capital gains does increase jobs, but not only that, capital gains bring in investments. If you look at countries that have zero capital gains, China, Singapore, Taiwan, they're magnets for new jobs, companies that are moving in, and also investment capital that are going to those countries. I agree with Senator McCain. We need to reduce even further our capital gains tax from what it is today, I think at 25 or so, to 15%. And that will help create jobs. I think in South Carolina, what we have to do again, we have to reduce our corporate tax rate. Senator McCain would like to do that at a national level. We also have to do it at the state level to attract new businesses within our state. So I agree with the zero-based capital gains, but you know, we hear the talk about 8 years of George Bush. It's really been the last 2 years of the Democrats. Prior to them taking over in 2006, we had consumer confidence at an all-time high. We had our unemployment rate at 4.5%. Now it's at 6.1%. Consumer confidence at an all-time low. Our gas prices was at $2 in South Carolina, about $2.19. Today, you know what they are, just going down from $4. So I think in 2 years, as we look at what has happened under the Democratic control, and they asked for it, we gave it to them. And matter of fact, as you know, they make laws, not the president. So I think when you look at what has happened under the Democrats the last 2 years, compared when they took over, we can't afford a White House with a Democrat and also with our trouble.
One law passed by the Democratic Congress that caused the results which you just outlined.
Well, one thing that they didn't do, no law. The Republicans wanted enforcement on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they said no, there wasn't a problem with Fannie and Freddie, and we know that's not true today. So that's one thing that they could have done without passing a law.
The law that Fannie Mae is currently operating under was passed by a Republican Congress.
Years ago.